I'm out here on the west side of our garden where I keep my nursery. And over on this side of the garden are plants that don't really rate to go into the regular part of the garden. There could be a lot of reasons for that. Maybe they're too small, maybe they're still growing, maybe they're sick and I'm trying to bring them back to health. But today I wanted to show you how important it is to keep moving these plants up into bigger pots until you can get them in the ground. Have you ever come home with something like this or maybe something like this, and then the next thing you know, it's been sitting in the garage for a month? Oh no. Have you ever bought one of these and then you notice that it's been sitting out there for a little while and you really need to do something with it? I'm going to go over how we transplant these little plants into bigger cans, and then that way they'll grow really well. Hi, I'm Sonia with Suburban Gardening, and I'm so excited for today because this is something that I do quite often. I spend a lot of time back here in my nursery tending to my plants and putting them into bigger pots if I just don't have time to put them in the ground, or they're going to live in those pots for a long time. Sometimes I take plants to other people's houses and it's just not the right time. We just went through a tremendous amount of rain. It rained for like 4 weeks here. So unusual for us. So the ground is soggy and I haven't been able to get out here and work anything. So I've got to put a few plants into bigger pots because they're just languishing in the little tiny ones. I wanted to show you a perfect example of this. This is Yarrow, which I absolutely love. Now, I bought these in a 6-pack, something like this, from Rogers Gardens, which I love. And I put it into this 3-inch can because I thought I'd be able to get them out in the garden really fast. Well, that never happened because we had so much rain. But I did take them and put one of them in this. This is just one plant here. You can see the difference when you take a smaller one, put it in a big container. It gives it a ton of room to grow. So I'm going to be transplanting a lot of plants today. And over here I have my hydrangeas, which they are absolutely stunning in my garden. I'm so excited. You can see that they're starting to come back to life. They just look like little twigs about 3 weeks ago. But I want to put it in this big old pot. This pot is just a little bit bigger than the one it's in now. So I'm going to need to cut the roots off the bottom, which is, a little risky, but I think it'll work. And I'm going to put new soil in here and new food in here. It's a great way to feed your plants when they're already in a pot, and we put them in a bigger pot, then we can get lots of nutrition down in there. I also have a couple of bougainvilleas that are in some very tall pots, and I want to use those pots for something else. So we're going to be pulling those bogies out of there and trying to keep the roots together as much as we can and put it in a different pot. So that way I can use these beautiful blue ones that I'm going to show you in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead, go through. I'm going to show you how you fertilize these and keep them going until you have time to put them someplace permanent. A couple of weeks ago, I did a project where I emptied out some really big pots and I pulled out a bunch of agapanthus. These poor agapanthus have just been laying here for weeks out of the dirt. So I need to get them in a pot. I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet. I think I'm going to take them over to my daughter's house. But in the meantime, they really need to get into the dirt. So I'm going to put a little more of the time-release fertilizer. What I'm using today is the Plant Tone. It's Espoma. It's great stuff. That'll help feed them if I really leave them in here too long. And I'm going to put 3 in a pot because I just don't want to use up all my pots, doing one at a time. Poor little things. I have 4. They'll be much happier down in here. Be careful when you repot something that you repot it to where the soil level was when you first got it. You don't want to pot them any deeper because they could rot down there in the soil. This one likes to have the little bulb up a little bit out of the soil. So we'll just leave it like that. I'm sure this plant is going to be so much happier like this. Now for a couple small ones. I was working around the garden yesterday and this little jade plant just popped right off. So I'm not really crazy about the jade plants, but I know somebody who is. So I'm going to go ahead and just put it down in some soil. Now I know that jade plants like a little more of a sandy soil, but I just have potting soil today. So It's got a really nice long stem on it. I'm just going to push it down in there. And that's the end of that. I'm sure it'll sprout, and I'll give it to my friend, and she'll be so happy to have it. The other thing that I did yesterday when I was working in the garden is I popped off one of these little spider plants. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in some soil, and I've got a really cute little trick to hold it down in there. This is just another one of those nursery cans that I got a little plant in. I held on to it. So I'm just going to put some dirt down in here. I'm not even going to feed it because I don't think that spider plants really care about food too much. But put it right on top there. And then I'm going to take a paper clip and open it up. And then I'm going to use this to hold this plant down inside the pot. The reason why I did that is all I need is for the bottom of this plant to make contact with the soil. And when it does that, it'll grow roots down in here, and before you know it, it'll outgrow this little pot. This is called a 3-inch can. And if you go to the nursery and they talk about 3-inch cans, this is what they're talking about. Oh boy, does that pop out. This yarrow has been in here about 3 or 4 months, and I bought this with the intention of putting them out of my hill. I'm still going to do that. I just can't work the soil right now because it's way too wet. So what I'm going to do with this yarrow is I'm going to rough these roots up really good. Oh my goodness. Really good. And I'm going to put it in this nice 4-inch can, probably 5-inch can. And it'll grow and be beautiful, just like the one I showed you earlier. Most important thing is that we don't want to bury the top because then it's likely they'll rot. Now I know this yarrow is just going to be super happy in here and keep on growing. And now I don't have to be in such a big hurry to get it into the ground. I can take my time. If you have a situation where you've been to the nursery and you've bought these wonderful 6-packs, which I love to do, they so much plant in such a small little thing, then I just put them in the next size pot, which would be a 3-inch can. So I'm just going to take all 4 of these and put them into a can real quick because I just don't have time to get to them in the next couple of weeks or maybe even longer. I will hold on to this 6-pack because I recycle all of my pots. I just keep reusing them until they fall apart. I think these little alisym could use some plant food too. They've been in those 6-pack for a long time. Same procedure. Rough up those roots a little bit. One really great thing about alisym is that it grows in the sun and it does okay in the shade as well. So I love to put it in hanging pots to let it drape down over the side, or just put it in my planters because it'll just creep around all the plants and make these beautiful white flowers. This thing's going to be so happy now it can actually hold some water. That's another great thing about transplanting into a bigger pot. When they get root bound like that, the water just runs right through and there's no moisture in there. So they can't draw up nutrients or any moisture at all. So putting them in a bigger pot, now this plant's good to go for several months. I was over at the home improvement store the other day and I saw these beautiful ferns and I just couldn't resist. Same thing happens when I go to Sam's. I pick these up because they're so pretty. Now, I don't have anywhere in my garden to put them at the moment. I'll make a place, but in the meantime, you cannot leave them in these bags. They'll dry up and die. So I'm just going to go ahead and pot them up. Now, in my garden soil that is just potting soil out of a bag, I went ahead and put some peat moss in here because I know that the ferns really like the peat moss. So basically just pour them out. See how dry this soil is? They really can't stay in here very long. So here's one of the tubers that's down in there. Looks great. Let's see if I can find the other one. Oh, you always seem to get one big one and one small one. Real easy. I'm just going to put these in some of those black cans. One of the problems when you buy a plant like this from the home improvement store in one of these type of containers, they don't give you a whole bunch of information. It's pretty vague on the back what you're supposed to be doing. So I recommend that you look it up online and it'll give you a lot of better information. I know that with the fern, I'm looking for where the stems came out of the top, and I'm going to put it down in this way. So the roots are on here and the stems, I can see them right here on the top. So that's how I'm going to place it down there, and I'm not going to bury it very deep just because I don't think that's the way you plant ferns. So I'm going to push it down in there, and I'm going to keep an eye on it. The other thing that I picked up were these canna-tubers, and they are absolutely beautiful when they're growing. But I've left these in the garage like 3 weeks already. I need to get them into pots. I'm going to be putting them in a new garden that I'm doing right behind me, but that ground is just too wet to work right now. So I'm going to get these out of these bags that they come in because I know they're drying out in there, and we're going to put them in a pot. That way they'll start growing before I can even get them in the ground. Thank goodness that on these bags, it says the color of the canna that's in here. So when I make my plant tags, I'll go ahead and write the color on there as well. This one says Red Fruity Tootie. I use a special pen for marking my tags because a Sharpie just washes off and fades away really fast. So this is just a garden marking pen. You can pick them up online or maybe at the nursery. Anyways, they work a lot better. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. When I'm looking at this tuber, these are a little hard to tell, but I can tell that the branch is actually coming up this way. So I'm going to set it down in here just like that. My Canna Tutti Frutti. I'm going to pot the rest of these, and they'll be nice and safe until I can get them planted in the ground. They'll start growing roots, so I'll actually be ahead of the game by the time I actually sink them in the ground. Now we're going to move on to the bigger pots. This hydrangea is heavy. Ugh. And look at how beautiful it looks. I did a video on how to overwinter your hydrangeas. So if yours aren't looking too great, you might want to take a look at that. But this is what you do with them in the springtime if they're in pots. So I had to roll this on the ground. I put it on the ground and I rolled it and I squished it because it would not come out. But let me show you what we're dealing with. I'm trying not to break off any of the little stems. It's pretty root bound. It's been in that pot a very, very long time. Here's a little weed. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my garden knife and I'm going to cut the bottom of this off. This is my garden knife. It's a pretty beefy little thing. It was given to me by a very sweet friend. It's serrated right here. So it's going to make a nice clean cut. The reason why I'm doing that is because the pot that I'm going to be putting this hydrangea in is not that much bigger, and I want it to have room to grow. So I'm just going to take off 1 inch on the bottom, and then that way it'll have a lot more room to grow roots. So that came off pretty easy, and this is just full of roots, so it's just pretty root bound. So now I have another whole inch of dirt that I can put that in. Now, when I plant hydrangeas, I like to baby them a little bit. And this is fresh garden potting soil, but I also like to put in some peat moss. Hydrangeas like a little bit of acid soil, and that might help the blooms turn blue as well. But this will really help the soil stay moist, and it'll aerate a little bit so the roots can get down in there really nice. The other thing I'm going to put down in the soil is I'm going to put some time-release fertilizer. Now this is for azaleas and camellias because it has a little bit of acid to it, And I know my hydrangeas like that, and it also causes the blooms to turn blue. So this will be time releasing over time, and it'll be feeding the plant over months to come. Here's our big pot. When I bought this pot, it didn't have holes in the bottom. I actually had to poke out some little round pegs that were in here. So be sure and make sure that there's holes in the bottom so it can drain. I've got to make sure that my azalea is going to fit in this pot with probably an inch, 3/4 of an inch on the top. So when I water it, all the water won't fall off the top. So I have to do a few tests. That's way too much soil. I'm going to need to take some out. Try it again. Oh, it's perfect. All finished. That took a few minutes, but oh, this plant is going to be so happy. I keep these hydrangeas in my secret garden, and I want to show you how I keep them there because I have a little tricky way that I water them. This is where I keep my hydrangeas in the spring, summer, and the fall. I put it right underneath this pot. This pot is on irrigation, so it gets watered regularly through the week. And when it drips down, it waters my hydrangea plant. So I don't have to run irrigation to this one. Works out perfectly. This is the big blue pot I was telling you guys about earlier, and I really want to get this bogey out of here so I can put some other things in it. Can you imagine how beautiful this would be with annuals all around in a big, I don't know, some kind of a grassy thing coming out the top? How perfect. Anyway, I quite frankly don't know how I'm going to get it out. I can see it's actually rooted through the bottom. I might have to kill it, and I don't want to do that, but I'm going to try to get it out without killing it. First thing I have to do is cut it way back. If you guys know anything about bougainvilleas, they are full of thorns. So I'm going to have to cut this thing way back. Now, the other thing I know about bougainvilleas is they don't like their roots to be messed with. So I'm going to be messing with it today. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to pull it out. I'm going to put it in a really big pot and see if I can save it. Fingers crossed. Can you see how the root came through the bottom? Cutting this part off won't hurt the plant. And it'll help me get it through. It was a little bit of a fight, but I got that bougainvillea out of that plant. It had rooted down so far in there that I had to take my clippers and cut the roots. Like I said, bogies don't like to have their roots messed with, so we'll see how it does. These are pretty tough plants, and I think it's going to do okay. Now, I've got to get this big old plant down in this big old pot, and it's not going to help me one little bit. Perfect fit. A little bit of sawing never hurt. The reason I'm going through so much trouble with these plants, and particularly with this bougainvillea, is because I want to put this bougainvillea on my hill. It has the most beautiful fuchsia colored flowers you've ever seen, and it just makes millions of them. So I really think it's worth trying to save it. And to buy a bougainvillea at this stage would be costly. very expensive. So I'm going to put the dirt in here and then I'm going to put it in the shade. And that way it'll give it a little time to come out of shock, because I did kind of hack at it a little bit. I think we were able to save the lives of quite a few plants today. I liberated a pot that I've been wanting to use for a long time, and we put those hydrangeas in a bigger pot. All of these little flowers that I'm not able to put into the ground right away, I'm just going to put them in bigger pots, and they'll be bigger plants by the time I go to plant them. It'll be fantastic. Well, you guys, that's all I have in the garden today, but there's always so many things to talk about. So thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you guys next time.